In the vast emptiness of the desert, where the sun burns without mercy and the land offers no refuge, fear doesn't hide. It waits. The Hills of Eyes franchise stands as one of horror cinema's most unforgiving explorations of survival, isolation, and the terrifying truth that civilization is only a fragile illusion, born from nuclear-age paranoia and grim folklore. The series drags ordinary people into an environment where law, order, and morality evaporate under pressure. This is horror that doesn't rely on ghosts or myths, but on human beings pushed beyond their limits. Across decades, remakes, and sequels, The Hills of Eyes has forced audiences to confront a chilling question. When stripped of comfort and control, how far will we go to survive? And how different are we from the monsters lurking in the hills? Always watching, always waiting? In 1977, filmmaker Wes Craven unleashed The Hills of Eyes, a film that would become a cornerstone of psychological and survival horror, pushing the boundaries of what audiences expected from the genre. Loosely inspired by the gruesome legend of the Sawney Bean Clan, Craven envisioned a story grounded in the terrifying potential of human depravity rather than supernatural forces. The narrative follows the Carter family, a seemingly ordinary middle-class American family, on a road trip to the bare Nevada desert. What begins as a routine vacation quickly descends into a nightmare when their car breaks down in a vast, empty wasteland, leaving them stranded and vulnerable in a place where no help is forthcoming. The desert itself becomes a silent antagonist, oppressive and unyielding, a place where the rules of society and morality seem to vanish under the sun's relentless heat. The family soon encounters a clan of cannibalistic mutants, humans deformed and hardened by generations of isolation and exposure to the desert's unforgiving environment. These mutants are not mindless monsters. They're survivors, creatures whose brutality is a reflection of the world's neglect and humanity's own latent savagery. Craven deliberately blurs the line between the civilized and the monstrous, showing how fear, hunger, and desperation can awaken primal instincts in even the most ordinary people. The film's raw, almost documentary-style cinematography, born from a limited budget, adds a grim realism to the terror. Handheld cameras, natural lighting, and stark landscapes create a sense of immediacy, forcing viewers to feel every moment of tension, every scream, and every moral compromise. The Carter struggle is brutal and unflinching. They are robbed, hunted, and physically and psychologically tormented. And as the story progresses, they are forced to abandon their moral codes to survive. This descent into savagery is the core of Craven's vision. Horror arises not from the monsters in the hills, but from the fragile veneer of civilization that can so easily crack under pressure. By the film's shocking climax, the audience is left with more than fear. It confronts an unsettling truth about humanity itself. The Carters may survive, but they are forever changed, forced to recognize the darkness that exists within themselves and within the world. The Hills of Eyes did more than scare viewers. It held up a mirror to the potential for violence, resilience, and moral compromise inherent in every human being. In doing so, it laid the foundation for a franchise that would explore these themes repeatedly, proving that true horror comes not just from what lurks in the shadows, but from the fragility of human society and the extreme conditions that strip it away. Beneath the blood, terror, and chaos of the Hills of Eyes lies a deeply unsettling exploration of human nature, morality, and societal collapse. The franchise doesn't rely on supernatural monsters. Instead, it examines the consequences of isolation, environmental extremity, and generational trauma. In the barren desert, the rules of civilization dissolve like heat mirages. The Carters, initially emblematic of ordinary middle-class morality, are forced to confront a terrifying reality. Survival often demands choices that defy ethics and empathy. In these moments, the franchise asks its audience a chilling question. When stripped of comfort, community, and law, how far would you go to stay alive? This moral erosion is mirrored in the mutants, whose grotesque appearances conceal a haunting story of victimhood and adaptation. They are not born as villains, but are shaped by neglect, radiation exposure, and societal abandonment, raising uncomfortable questions about culpability and the nature of monstrosity. In this light, the desert becomes more than a backdrop. It is a crucible, a place that strips away civility and exposes the raw instincts buried within all humans. The line between hunter and hunted blurs, forcing viewers to confront the frightening idea that humanity and savagery are not mutually exclusive. Wes Craven's narrative brilliance lies in his ability to intertwine horror with social commentary. The original 1977 film, released during an era of post-Vietnam anxieties and nuclear paranoia, subtly reflects societal fears, the fragility of American innocence, the consequences of technological hubris, and the inevitability of conflict when humans are pushed beyond their limits. This thematic depth distinguishes The Hills Have Eyes from conventional slasher films. It is not merely about gore or shock value. It is about examining the human condition under extreme pressure. The franchise's exploration of duality and moral ambiguity became a defining characteristic in later entries. The mutants and victims, while on opposite sides of violence, share a fundamental trait: the will to survive at any cost. This mirrored struggle creates a tension that goes beyond physical horror. It delves into psychological terror, forcing the audience to question who the real monsters are. By embedding social, environmental, and ethical commentary beneath the surface of visceral terror, The Hills Have Eyes elevates its horror from simple scares to an unsettling reflection on humanity itself. When The Hills Have Eyes first hit theaters in 1977, reactions were polarized. Mainstream audiences and critics were shocked by the film's unflinching violence and grim portrayal of human savagery, with some dismissing it as mere exploitation. Yet beneath the blood and brutality, those willing to look deeper recognized a narrative rich with social commentary and psychological depth. Wes Craven had tapped into the post-Vietnam, post-nuclear anxieties of America, reflecting fears of societal collapse, isolation, and the moral compromises that extreme situations demand. The desert, scorching and unrelenting, became a character itself, a crucible where morality and humanity were tested and often found wanting. The film's initial modest box office success did little to hint at its lasting influence, but over time it gained traction among horror enthusiasts, gradually earning cult status. Fans and scholars began to appreciate the film's layered storytelling, its commentary on class, survival, and the fragility of civilization, and its stark, almost documentary-like cinematography, which heightened the realism and intensity of the terror. Michael Berryman's haunting portrayal of Pluto, the mutated son of the cannibal clan, became iconic, demonstrating how physical difference could evoke both fear and sympathy simultaneously. The original movie's impact extended beyond immediate audience reactions. It influenced the burgeoning wave of extreme horror in the decades to follow, showing filmmakers that terror could be psychologically complex, morally ambiguous, and socially reflective, all while still delivering visceral thrills. Craven's careful construction of suspense, combined with the raw desperation of the characters, transformed a modestly budgeted horror film into a blueprint for survival horror. Over time, what began as a shocking, controversial entry in the genre became a revered, essential piece of horror cinema, a film study for both its terror and its insight into the human psyche when faced with extreme adversity. Nearly 3 decades after Wes Craven's original shocked audiences, The Hills Have Eyes was reborn in 2006 under the direction of Alexander Aya, a filmmaker known for pushing horror to new extremes. This remake retained the core story of an ordinary family trapped in a desolate desert, hunted by a clan of mutants, but amplified every element: violence, tension, and emotional stakes, turning the horror into an almost unbearable experience. Where the 1977 version relied on suspense and implication, Aya's vision was unrelenting and visceral, thrusting audiences directly into the characters' terror with long, unbroken shots of pursuit, brutal attacks, and gut-wrenching moments of desperation. The remake expanded the narrative, giving the mutants a backstory rooted in nuclear testing, tying their grotesque deformities to government negligence and environmental catastrophe. This addition made the antagonist simultaneously horrifying and tragic, blurring the line between villain and victim even further. Aya's mutants were no longer just feral predators. They were symbols of humanity's capacity for destruction and the unintended consequences of technological hubris. The Carters, now updated for modern audiences, were forced to confront not only physical threats but moral dilemmas, their survival requiring ingenuity, brutality, and a hard-eyed confrontation with their own latent instincts. The 2006 remake was also a technical evolution. Cinematography, sound design, and practical effects combined to create a suffocating, immersive atmosphere. Every rustle of sand, every echo of a distant scream, and every shadowed figure on the horizon heightened the audience's anxiety. The film's R-rated intensity became legendary, with some cuts originally earning NC-17 consideration due to sheer graphic content. Critics noted that the remake was more than a simple retelling. It was a reinvention that honored the spirit of Craven's original while modernizing its shock and emotional impact. By the time the final act unfolds, the remake leaves viewers not only horrified but emotionally spent. It is a film that tests endurance, forcing audiences to experience the extreme vulnerability of isolation and the terror confronting humanity's darker instincts. The Hills Have Eyes 2006 demonstrated that horror could be both brutally entertaining and thematically resonant, reinforcing the franchise's central idea that in the harshest conditions, civilization is fragile, and survival often demands a confrontation with the monstrous aspect of ourselves. Following the intense revival of the franchise in 2006, The Hills Have Eyes 2 arrived in 2007, attempting to expand the universe beyond the original family-centered narrative. This sequel shifted focus to a group of National Guard trainees conducting exercises in the same desolate desert, only to become targets of the mutated, cannibalistic clan. While the film maintained the relentless gore and high-octane chase sequences of the remake, it struggled to recapture the psychological depth and thematic weight that had defined both the original and the 2006 version. The mutants, once tragic symbols of human neglect and environmental consequences, were portrayed more as relentless killing machines, emphasizing shock and body count over character development. The soldiers, similarly, felt more like archetypes than real people, their survival instincts often reduced to standard horror tropes. The moral ambiguity that had been central to the franchise, where victims and killers reflected different faces of human nature, was largely overshadowed by spectacle. Critics and fans noted that the sequel leaned heavily into gore-driven horror, sacrificing the nuanced exploration of fear, isolation, and humanity that had set the series apart. Despite its shortcomings, The Hills Have Eyes 2 did maintain the franchise's signature tension and desert as adversary aesthetic. The harsh landscapes, claustrophobic encounters, and relentless pursuit sequences kept the adrenaline high, and the film found an audience among horror fans hungry for extreme, visually intense experiences. Yet, compared to its predecessors, it marked a decline in narrative complexity, signaling a shift in the series from thought-provoking survival horror to a more conventional, shock-based formula. Ultimately, the sequel serves as both a reminder of the franchise's potential and a cautionary tale of what can happen when spectacle overtakes story. While it succeeded in delivering visceral scares, it also highlighted the delicate balance between horror as social commentary and horror as pure entertainment, a balance that the franchise had previously mastered but temporarily lost in this chapter of its evolution. Despite its uneven trajectory, The Hills Have Eyes has secured a lasting place in horror cinema through its raw honesty and thematic boldness. The franchise helped redefine survival horror by proving that the most terrifying threats do not come from the supernatural, but from human beings shaped by neglect, fear, and extreme environments. Its influence can be seen in the wave of gritty, realistic horror films that followed, particularly in the 2000s, where violence was no longer stylized fantasy, but something intimate, brutal, and emotionally exhausting. Wes Craven's original vision laid the groundwork for horror that functioned as social commentary, exploring nuclear anxiety, class division, and the fragile illusion of civilization. The 2006 remake reinforced this legacy for a new generation, showing that remakes could honor their source material while intensifying emotional impact and modern relevance. Together, these films demonstrated that horror could be confrontational without being meaningless, forcing audiences to wrestle with moral ambiguity rather than offering easy resolutions. The franchise also cemented the desert as an iconic horror setting, a vast, indifferent landscape where isolation becomes a weapon and survival strips characters to their core. This setting influenced countless films that followed, emphasizing environment as an active force in storytelling rather than a passive backdrop. Even when later entries faltered, the central idea endured, that humanity, when removed from structure and safety, is capable of terrifying transformation. Ultimately, The Hills Have Eyes remains relevant because it dares to suggest that monsters are not born in the hills. They are shaped there, through its brutality, discomfort, and refusal to offer moral comfort. The franchise continues to stand as a stark reminder that civilization is fragile, and when it collapses, the true horror lies not in what watches from the shadows, but in what we become when no one is watching. Interesting trivias. The original 1977 film was produced on a very limited budget, which forced Wes Craven to rely heavily on natural lighting and handheld camera work, unintentionally creating the gritty, documentary like realism that later became one of the film's greatest strengths. The story was loosely inspired by the Scottish legend of Sawney Bean, a real life myth about a cannibal clan said to have lived in caves and preyed on travelers, which deeply influenced the film's themes of isolation and human savagery. Michael Berryman, who portrayed the mutant Pluto, became one of the most recognizable figures in horror cinema due to his distinctive appearance caused by hypohidrotic ectodermal dysplasia, and his performance added an eerie, almost tragic dimension to the character. Despite the film's controversy, The Hills Have Eyes was one of Wes Craven's personal favorites among his own works, as he felt it best captured his view of humanity under extreme pressure. The 2006 remake was initially edited to an NC-17 rating due to its graphic violence before being trimmed down to secure an R rating for theatrical release. Alexander Ayas shot much of the remake in the harsh Moroccan desert, where cast and crew endure extreme heat that mirror the on-screen suffering. Wes Craven publicly praised the remake, calling it one of the rare horror remakes that successfully respected and expanded upon the original film's themes. The Hills Have Eyes 2, 2007, was largely assembled using and used concepts and ideas from the 2006 remake, which contributed to its rushed feeling and mixed reception. Despite the franchise's brutal reputation, it has been frequently cited by filmmakers and critics as an important influence on modern survival and extreme horror, proving that its impact extends far beyond shock value alone. The Hills Have Eyes endures as more than a franchise built on shock and brutality. It stands as a harsh reflection of humanity stripped of comfort, law, and illusion. Across its films, the desert becomes a proving ground where civilization crumbles and survival exposes the darkest corners of the human spirit. Whether through Wes Craven's raw original vision or the unforgiving intensity of its modern remake, the series forces audiences to confront an unsettling truth. Monsters are not always born from legend or mutation, but from desperation and neglect. In the endless silence of the wasteland, The Hills Have Eyes reminds us that when society disappears, what truly terrifies us is not what lurks in the hills, but what we are capable of becoming.